It's a subject I've spoken about here at length, the growing concern over what's happening with boys and young men in America, falling behind in school, struggling to connect, often feeling lost. My next guest, Scott Galloway, says that crisis is reshaping families and relationships and our economy. His new book, Notes on Being a Man, is now the #1 bestseller at Amazon. It's a semi-autobiographical look at what's gone wrong and how men can reclaim purpose, connection, and meaning in a modern world that has left many of them behind. Scott Galloway, he's the academic, the entrepreneur, the noted speaker, the co-host of the Prof G Markets, Raging Moderates podcasts, joins me now. All right, Scott, desire for sex often is cast as toxic masculinity, but in the book, you offer thoughts on dancing, drinking, and sex. What do they have to do with this?
Well, if you think of the three legs of the stool of masculinity, I would argue the first is being a provider. I think in a capitalist society, it's a good idea for a young man to take responsibility, or at least believe he'll need at some point to take economic responsibility for his household. And to be clear, sometimes that means getting out of the way of your partner who's better at that money thing and being more supportive. Two, immediately moving to protection. The most masculine jobs are firefighter, cop, military. What do they do at the end of the day? Protection. And Michael, to be blunt, some of the really disappointing things about the leadership, most valuable or wealthiest man in the world and our president, people you would naturally look to as role models for, or young men would look to as role models for masculinity, I feel like they've skipped the protection part. I don't feel that's their first inclination. And the whole point of prosperity is to protect people. And then finally, as you referenced, procreation. I think a man's desire, a young man's desire to have a relationship and sexual experiences has been demonized. And I believe that that is fire, if you will. It can be destructive. Too much time with porn, you can begin to objectify women, have unrealistic expectations, and sometimes those algorithms will take you to kind of near misogynistic or violent places. But that fire, most of the time, can be captured in an engine and used for progress. Wanting to be attractive to women such that you can have relationships, I think makes most men better men. I think it encourages them to get out of the house, to work out, to groom, to have a kindness practice, to develop skills, have a plan, demonstrate excellence. So I think we need to stop pathologizing a young man's sexual desires and to a certain extent celebrate it. You know what I hear the most from women when I'm out is I'm here, I look fantastic, I'm obviously single and ready to mingle, and nobody approaches me. So let's celebrate the greatest alliance in history, and that is the alliance between men and women. And I believe you agree with me that the most rewarding thing in life is the opportunity to find someone to procreate with and feel as if you're protecting them, noticing your partner, and building a safe, loving household.
Why are these things not often so openly spoken about? Like, I'm mindful of the fact that some are going to hear this conversation and say, these are two bald, privileged white guys.
First, let's acknowledge that the gag reflex, the especially strong gag reflex, I think both of us received 5 years ago when we started talking about this, which, by the way, it's become much more productive. I was on Katie Couric yesterday. I'm going on with Oprah on Monday. There's a recognition by women that things have, that there's a real problem. But men of our generation, Michael, have had so much unfair advantage. From 1945 to 2000, America registered a third of the economic growth with just 5% of the population. So we had 6 times the prosperity. And almost all of that prosperity was crammed into the 1/3 of the American population that was white, male, and heterosexual. So an understandable gag reflex or response of, well, Scott, you and Michael have had a 3,000-year head start. That is understandable. The problem is, should a 19-year-old male who does not have the advantages we had, when I applied to college, UCLA, 72% admissions rate. This year, 9%. Housing costs have gone up 4-fold, while wages have gone up 2-fold. Education's up 7-fold. So they don't have nearly, many of the on-ramps to a middle-class life for a man have been taken away. It used to be 40-60 female to male. When it was 40-60, we had Title IX. We weighed in with affirmative action for women. Now that it's 60-40 and more like 66-33 when you look at graduation rates, there's no discussion of anything resembling male affirmative action. We have a bias towards men in K through 12. 70 to 80% of the teachers are female. Boys are twice as likely to be suspended. So the bottom line, Michael, is that these young men are paying for the price of our privilege.
I agree.
If you went into a morgue, I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
The book is, semi-autobiographical, which I think is a large part of the appeal. And I want to tell people who don't know that Scott Galloway was raised by a single immigrant mother who, as you say, lived and died a secretary. You graduated, yes, from UCLA with a 2.27. You were lucky to get out. And while your father was an important figure in your life, he wasn't there for you. What specific advice do you have for fatherless boys?
Well, what I would say is the data is clear. The single point of failure for a boy is when he loses a male role model. When a boy loses a male role model to death, divorce, or abandonment, at that moment, he becomes more likely to be incarcerated than graduate from college. And what's interesting is a girl in a single parent home has the similar outcomes as a dual parent home. All the research points to one conclusion, Michael, and that is while boys are physically stronger, they're emotionally, neurologically, much, much weaker. And there has to be a zeitgeist in our society that the moment a boy in our society loses a male role model, that friends, mentors, the Boy Scouts, big brothers, and other men get involved in their life. And unfortunately, Michael, men our age aren't stepping up. There are 3 times as many women applying to be big sisters in New York as there are men. And there's a bit of a taboo about getting involved in a young man's life. And what I can tell you is someone who mentors young men, it's really easy to add value, answering basic questions. No, you cannot live off of pineapple juice and creatine. You probably shouldn't move to Alaska right now if you have a good job. And believing you need to be a CEO or a baller, that's not true. You can add a lot of value just by your sheer presence. But in sum, if we want better men, we need to be better men. The ultimate expression of masculinity, take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your community, take care of your country. But the ultimate expression, in my view, of masculinity is to take an irrational, passionate interest in the well-being of a child that isn't yours. Step up, get involved in a young boy's life. They are everywhere. They are struggling, and they need our help.
There's another aspect of this that we have to get to with limited time, and it's this. You and I, in speaking about it, I feel like we had the same childhood, you on the West Coast and me on the East. But you and I didn't have the most valuable companies, as you like to say, in the world working to convince us that we could have a facsimile of a real life. I mean, they are up against all of this artificial intelligence and, as Scott Galloway speaks of, 40% of the stock market. So how do they combat that? What's the short advice?
We've connected rage and sequestering our young adults from the rest of society to the entire economy of the U.S. The entire economy is a big bet on big tech, and they do a lot of things, but primarily they try and sequester you from your relationships, take you online, keep you online by enraging you. And we end up, we are literally evolving, Michael, a species of asocial, asexual males. We need to recognize that big tech is not our friend. And my message to any young person is the time you spend on a screen is inversely correlated to your economic well-being, your mental well-being, your romantic well-being. In sum, the amount of time you spend outside is positively correlated to your success and your happiness in life. And these guys are not our friends. Their job, they have connected trillions of dollars in value to isolating you. Resist. You want a rebellion? Rebel against social media and get out and meet people in person and touch grass.
I made reference at the outset of the program in my commentary to the impact of artificial intelligence on job loss, and something that I've had underscored by Scott Galloway for me, and I think a valuable lesson for anybody, men, women, anybody listening to this, is get to the office. Because if those cuts come and you're not known, you know what I'm saying. Put it in your words in our final 30 seconds.
You're 38% more likely to be promoted if you go into the office. In sum, whether it's a promotion or who goes on a list for a layoff, the decider will make those decisions based on relationships, who gets promoted or who goes on a list. In sum, if you don't know the person and they work remotely, you're much more likely to end up on a list of who gets laid off. Also, and HR directors don't like to talk about this, Michael, 1 in 3 relationships begin at work. So where are men supposed where are men supposed to demonstrate excellence to potential romantic partners? They're not going to work, they're not going to church, they're not going to school. The office for a young person is a feature, not a bug. And then going back to your statement about not drinking, I'm friends with the people in the anti-alcohol movement, I get it, but the risk to your 25-year-old liver of alcohol is dwarfed by the risk of social isolation. Get out, drink more, make a series of bad mistakes that might pay off.
And as I learned from you, and I 50 years too late, learn how to dance. The book is awesome. You don't need me to tell you that. It's the #1 book in the United States. Notes on Being a Man. Thank you, Scott Galloway. We love it when you're here. Good luck.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for all your support on this issue.
Amen. From social media, from the world of X, we have this. What do we have? Independent women do not want or need these needy men. Maybe their parents shouldn't have allowed them to spend formative years secluded in their rooms playing video games. They've never matured and never will and are incapable of handling. Wow, who needs that? The pessimistic gardener, I would say to you that who most needs help in straightening out our men are our women. Because just look at the impact that it's having on them by extension. Younger women today marrying older men because the younger men are unsuitable as partners. It bodes poorly for all of us as a society. And I just think it's taken us too long to finally have the conversation where we're willing to say, I'll put it this way. If there were any other constituent group among us as a society struggling as much as the data suggests our young men are struggling, there would have been all sort of political and affinity group support that hasn't materialized for the men because nobody wants to be perceived until Scott wrote this kick-ass book as being an advocate for men. It's in men's best interest and women's best interest that we help them get the ship righted. All right. I want to remind you, go to my website at Smerconish.com. I love today's poll question. By 2050, do you think the United States is going to best be described as a democratic socialist nation? I'll have results at the end of the hour. While you're there, sign up for the newsletter. It's free and it's worthy. Still to come, your social media reaction to my commentary. Plus, for the first time in years, America's obesity rate is ticking down. Now 37% of adults, down from nearly 40% just 3 years ago. It comes as weight loss drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy go mainstream. Economist Emily Oster says lower prices could make an even bigger difference. And make sure, as I said, to sign up for the newsletter as you're voting because you also get the work of illustrators such as Scott Stantis.